Welcome to the JV Media Digital Drop-In. I'm so glad to have everyone here. My name is Sarah Benoit. If you don't already know me, I'm the lead instructor of the JV Media Institute. And I am super excited today to be bringing to our digital drop-in the amazing Reggie Tidwell. And before we get started, I'm going to let Reggie tell you a little bit about himself, but I just want to give a big shout out to Reggie because number one, he's probably one of the longest running friends I've had in this town when it comes to an industry colleague and just somebody that I really respect and look up to. So as a web designer all these years and as somebody who's worked in the field, I've always looked to Reggie, quite honestly, for inspiration. So it means a lot to me for him to be here with us today. And also, I'm lucky enough to be the digital marketing co-chair on the board of AIGA Asheville here in Asheville, North Carolina. So the AIGA is a wonderful organization focused on people that work somewhere in the design field, whether you're a graphic designer or web designer, print designer, photographer, videographer. And I have had the absolute pleasure over the last year of working with the AIG Asheville team and their board, and Reggie is our amazing president. So like I said, I'm extremely thrilled to have him here today to share some of his insight with us. And Reggie, I'd love for you to just introduce yourself to those who don't know you and talk a little bit about your background for a couple minutes.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here. Thanks for taking a risk and signing up, hoping that you might actually learn something. I am Reggie Tidwell. I am first and foremost a graphic designer. I have a BFA in graphic design, but I have been a commercial photographer since 2006. I'm also an FAA certified drone pilot. Drone is just another camera, just another tool in the bag. But, you know, I love the creative community. I love being a designer and a photographer and interfacing with all the people that sort of come with that industry. And I'm super excited about our AIGA chapter and all the wonderful things we get to do for our creative community through that vessel. And Sarah, as modest as she is also a rock star. And she and Heather Argus, who are digital content co-chairs, really make us look amazing. So I think we're going to dig into a little bit of what that content, what that kind of content is, and some ways to kind of make it come together gracefully. So I'm happy to be here and happy to take questions at the end.
Excellent. So just to give you all a rundown of kind of the housekeeping of how we're going to run today's webinar. First of all, everyone who signed up will get a copy of our slide deck, as well as a copy of the recording. So as you're listening, don't feel like you have to write every single thing down or remember everything. You will get a copy of this, and like I said, you'll also be able to download the slides, go back over the information that we've shared. Also, if you'd like to submit questions during the call, I want to invite you to put them into the Q&A. So in Zoom webinars, there's a question and answer feature. It'll allow me to better follow the questions that you have and make sure that Reggie and I both get to look at them and answer them. In the chat, you can feel free to talk to each other or share different resources or comments that you have about the material today. But if you have a question you'd like for us to address, I'd really appreciate it if you pop that into the Q&A feature. And again, it'll alert me every time you ask a question, and I will definitely be watching and paying attention for those as we go along. So the first topic that I asked Reggie to sort of think about that we could share with you today is how to develop a good eye. So I wanted to sort of introduce this part of the conversation just because I think having a good eye, part of that is subjective, right? So we all have opinions about what kind of graphics we like and don't like, and what kind of colors we like, what kind of images we relate to. So there are some things in this world that I feel are subjective. But I think if you study design and you study photography and videography, what you find is there is a level of this information that is not subjective. There are actually some baselines that we can really tap into in order to understand how to create imagery that's going to be more impactful. So Reggie, I was hoping, as you can see on the slide, that you'd talk to us a little bit about some of the suggestions that you shared with me and how they work.
Absolutely. So to build on what Sarah was saying, she's absolutely right. The reality is there's a reason why one image gets tons of likes and another one doesn't, or one image does very well in ad placement and another one doesn't. Is because there is a baseline, there is a foundation of which you want to build upon when you are developing your creative eye. And there are some rules that I think are good things to sort of get familiar with. I picked these three specific images because they talk about some of the things that I think set aside professional photography from amateur and novice photography. Top left is what we call the golden ratio, and that is using an age-old rule to compose shots. And it's one of those things, really all of these start to become almost ingrained. That's why I say familiarize yourselves with them, because you don't have to be constantly thinking of them. Essentially, when I am looking through the viewfinder on a camera, this data is already in my head. So when I'm sizing up a shot, I'm not thinking, okay, where are my rule of thirds? Where are my thirds? Where's my golden ratio? That's not what's happening. What's happening is I've become so familiar with these things that when I'm composing the shot, it's almost like muscle memory. You start to intuitively land on a composition. And the reason that composition works is because it's probably based on a pre-existing rule. And so just to move through these, the golden ratio is the one that's up at the very top left. The rule of thirds, this is a portrait in Cat Island, Bahamas. And as you can see, I've just intuitively placed one of the subjects in the photo right on the third line. And that is, I mean, it's almost right down the middle of his face. Over time, that starts to happen so intuitively and so naturally that it's second nature. You don't think about it. The shot just ends up looking really awesome. And then one of the other sort of telltale signs for me when I'm looking at landscape photography, and I feel like there's a lot of amazing up and coming landscape photographers out there. This shot in the bottom right is also from Cat Island, Bahamas, is the horizon line. If you have a very defined, very obvious horizon line in your photo, level it up. You know, super, super easy to do in almost any photo editing application, whether it be free or something from the Adobe Creative Cloud, like Lightroom or Photoshop. Even apps on your phone have the ability for you to take the image and rotate it. And usually there will be a grid system that you can turn on in your phone. When Sarah posed this question, I had to think about it. I was like, all right, what kind of things are there that I use, and what you know, one of the first things I do if I get a new cell phone is I turn on enable the grid so that I can actually be able to mainly for horizon lines, just to make sure that I can keep them level. And honestly, when it comes to photography, you know, the phones are becoming so amazing these days, and it's getting easier and easier just to take at least a high definition photo, a photo that's properly lit, that's properly exposed. And so everything that falls on you is really just composing the shot or finding the right subject matter. And so one of the things is when you have a grid on, like even when let's say you're in an art museum and you're walking through and you see some really cool art on the wall, or you're just looking at the beautiful entrance of some cool architecture and you're like, wow, that's really cool. Like even in that moment, if you're trying to be a content creator or you're really wanting to take your content creation to the next level, even in that moment, even if you just have a cell phone, you should be looking at that image as an opportunity to convey something beautiful to your audience, whether it's something compelling, and so don't just throw the phone up and take the shot. Like if you have your grids on, you can see, especially with architecture, you see my hands are sort of off, my hands out of the frame, but essentially all the horizontals in an architectural image should be vertical. Because if they're not vertical, if they're tilted, the eye it creates this sort of distraction. So if you've got, no matter how beautiful the image is, about how beautiful that interior space is, if the verticals in it are all, you know, tilted, the first thing you notice is there's this sort of sense that, you know, this is maybe amateur, it's not really, you know, but you can take a really amazing photo with your camera by having some of these rules in place.
Can you share, Reggie, where you usually find those settings for the grid on your phone? Is it inside your camera? Is it inside just the settings of the phone? Just curious.
Yes, of course, as I pull open my camera. So I think the iPhone automatically has it. I'm going to show you my iPhone, as you can see yourself. So I'm creating that sort of stereoscopic effect. But as you can see the grid, I think this grid actually on the iPhone is automated by default is on. If you're an Android user, you just go into the menu system for the actual camera and you can turn on the grid. You can disable it and enable it. If you're using a DSLR, whether it be a Canon or Nikon, you're gonna find that in the display settings. So you go through the display settings and you look for grid. And usually you can choose either a 3x3 grid or 5x5 or 4x4. So there are a lot of options depending on what kind of media. If you're using a point and shoot camera, it's probably also gonna have a, I can guarantee 90% of the cameras that have been made in the last, I'd say 5 years, are definitely gonna have an ability to turn on a grid system because it's such a great device to use when you're taking photos.
Awesome. And Reggie, you also shared with me, you know, what I considered kind of the getting into the creative flow, tips for doing that. And you especially mentioned breaking the rules and looking for inspiration. So can you share a little bit about that aspect of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So to speak to breaking the rules, a little bit of what I just talked about, having that foundation is great, but sometimes there's a shot that is just gonna look better slightly tilted, slightly adjusted, slightly off center, or slightly, you know, one of my favorite rules to break, so many people are, you know, the rule of thirds is great and it definitely will give you a properly composed image and usually gives you at least a baseline for an attractive image. And then the rest of it is up to you. But there are times where I just want to split an image. I want the horizon line right in between the middle of the image. And that used to be sort of a faux pas. You probably see more and more people doing it these days. But if I'm, say for instance, I am in some beautiful coastline and the sky is equally as compelling as the foreground. So I don't want more sky than foreground and I don't want more foreground than sky. I might split that right down the middle so I get equal parts of both. And what you end up with is an image that tells a story that, wow, the sky was absolutely amazing and on fire or whatever, but then these rocks and beautiful rock outcroppings or whatever made some really beautifully visual, compelling elements in the photo. And so to be able to capture them both, sometimes you have to make that call. And so I say use the rules as a nice baseline, but don't be afraid to break them. You'll know once as you get used to, and this will bring this sort of segues into my next point. When you are looking for inspiration, there's so many great resources out there. There's 500px.com. If you're not familiar with it, I would definitely bookmark it now because it's a great website. There's also Flickr used to be a thing. People are kind of dropping away from Flickr. Instagram is cool, but Instagram for the most part has mostly a square format. I break that rule all the time. I always end up putting landscape shots in there. I don't like my landscape shots to be square all the time. I want the full 16:9 or 4:3 or whatever I happen to be, whatever aspect ratio I'm working with. But sites like 500px are great because you can go and look at popular images. And the more you look and digest what people tend to find appealing that gets a lot of response, the more you start to have this data in there, the more data goes in your head, the more you have soaked up that information. So when you're out in the world or you're in a crowded, busy, beautiful new city and you're looking for compelling photos, you have that sort of running knowledge in your head that sort of helps aid you to find interesting subject matter, interesting compositions. It's just in there. So as a creative, I'm constantly looking at beautiful work that other people make, and I'm constantly inspired by it. So I say any given successful creative is working off of equal parts their own sort of prowess, equal parts inspiration from things that they've been inspired by in the past, and then equal parts technical sort of information like the rule of thirds and things like that that you have in place. So you get this sort of nice collaboration of data that you work with that becomes kind of fun, because when you are searching for when you're searching for interesting subject matter, it gets easier and easier because you have that sort of working knowledge.
No, and I just want to second what you said, Reggie, because I definitely spend time. I've always been a fan of iStock, and
Yeah,
I
I
love
talked
to go
great.
through the photography there and just look at what people are doing. And that kind of comes to the third point I wanted to just make to everyone, which is don't be afraid to experiment. One thing I've learned by being friends with a lot of different photographers is when I am taking my own photographs on my iPad or my iPhone, for me to do a number of different shots, to just go through and shoot it, then take a different angle, shoot it again, put the person in a different position, or move the things I'm shooting into a different position, shoot it again. This is why I think a lot of photographers have these giant external hard drives full of all the thousands upon thousands of photos they've taken, is because
That's
sometimes,
the
you have to do a few things before you get what everybody refers to as the money shot, right?
yeah.
So don't be afraid to play around with what you're doing and to experiment in some ways, because I think sometimes there's magic in that experimentation.
No,
So
you're
now,
exactly right. So I
yeah,
was
so
just
now I
gonna
want to talk a little
just
bit about lighting, which I feel like for all of us who are doing DIY stuff, this becomes a big part of the conversation. And for me, lighting when it comes to doing your own photography is really what makes the difference between doing something that looks professional versus doing something that looks not professional. I think lighting can be a big deciding factor there. So can you share with us, Reggie, some of the basic tips that you have for people about lighting?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to speak both to photography and videography. And the great thing is that the resources right now are plentiful these days. It used to be a lot harder to figure out ways to get around super expensive strobes and other lighting options. But now there's so many things on the market that allow you to be able to light either a person or a scene with minimal investment, which I think is great. But one of my favorite and most available and free forms of light is natural light. And when I say natural light, I mean light coming through a window, being outside on a cloudy day. One of my favorite things is to be able to shoot people when it's overcast, because what you end up with overcast lighting is, it's like the most, you can mimic the most expensive lights that you can buy, because it's beautifully and evenly diffused. You don't get any harsh shadows across the person's face, or if it's a landscape scene, you get to really make the subject matter in the landscape image pop, whether it's a waterfall, whether it's a coastline. Natural light is amazing, and clouds do a wonderful job of filtering light. So even if it's like a partly cloudy day, just watching how the clouds are moving and just kind of trying to time when the clouds are going to cover the sun or partly block the sun to get you the right kind of light for your shot. One of the things I say to stay away from is really harsh midday light. And that's kind of one of the, and that's a rule that I usually never break, because sadly it's very difficult to make someone look good when they're being harshly lit from overhead by a really bright sun, and they're squinting, and usually they're sweating because there's so much intensity from the sun. It's really hard to make that work, right? So I say if you are out and you're trying to photograph someone in natural light on a really bright sunny day, and Sarah spoke to this a little bit, we had this back and forth about it, but go into places where there's shadows, go into places where you can duck around the corner, and you're still getting plenty of ambient offset light from the sun, but you're not directly in it. So your scene can be properly lit, but your subject can be properly lit, but you don't have to worry about them having patches of sun on their face. And to move through some of these other examples, I say being able to use a speed light. One of the sort of common things that people do is they put a speed light. So a speed light, just so you know, and I'll grab one really quick so I can show you. I use the term speed light. You guys can still hear me. I'm gonna grab mine that I keep in my bag, and ultimately a speed light is just this. And actually I'll do even one better just to show you some cool things that you can do. There's a company called Magmod that makes these really cool, what we call modifiers, light modifiers. So this is a speed light. Everybody's probably familiar with this. You take the hot shoe and you shove it on top of your camera and you take pictures. I've got this modifier on mine that allows me to put this little magnetic light diffuser on it, which makes a world of difference, because what it does is it takes the harsh light that's coming out of this and evenly distributes it over the subject, so you don't end up with this really bright, harsh light. And when I say off, one of the other things I say is to take something like this. When I say off-camera speed light, this thing right here is what we call, it's a hot shoe off camera. And so I can take my speed light and plug it into here like so, right? So that's locked in, and then this thing goes on top of the camera. So what happens is it gives you more creative opportunities, as opposed to always having the light coming from the camera where the person's looking, constantly hitting them in the face. You can take your hot shoe, hold it by hand, and hold it up high and aim it down. You can hold it at eye level with the person and light them from the side to make it appear like there's a light source off to the side, like for instance, a window, even though there's not a window. So it gives you all kinds of creative opportunities. And this thing, I can't imagine this thing costs more than like 15 bucks or so. I've had mine for probably 15 years or so, but it's called an off-camera shoe cord. This particular one is for a Canon, but I know Nikon makes them, and I know pretty much every camera manufacturer has one. And then when you're doing video, I think it's really important to consider how your light's gonna work. Same rules apply. Diffused natural light is gonna be best to get really nice, even tones across your subject. Also, when someone's talking and you're capturing through video, it's really more telling when, it's one thing when you're just taking a single frame of someone, you might be able to get them to, smile and not be squinting for like one shot, right? But with video, it's really hard to have someone harshly lit and to be talking for 2 or 3 minutes with a harsh light source, because you're going to get them squinting live on camera. And so that diffused light really comes into play for video. And so they make these days these really awesome video lights that are becoming less and less expensive. I use these are super inexpensive. They're called platinum, and it's just a little LED light. It's something that allows you, usually you can dial the temperature from cool to warm, so you can adjust the Kelvin on it to get the kind of look that you're wanting to get. And it also allows you to dial up the intensity. So you can go with very intense, fully exposed, like all the way up light, or you can dial it down a little bit as needed. And these things are great. They're really inexpensive, and you can usually put them on the hot shoe of your camera. You can do them off camera. You can put them on a light stand or a tripod. They usually have, like this particular one does in fact have a 3/8 inch tripod mount on the bottom of it. So I could put this on a tripod, and now I've got a light source so that I can actually light my subject, and then I don't have to think about it. I can just ask them, if I'm interviewing them, I can ask them questions and just capture the magic. So you can mount these things on tables. You can You can also use multiple video light sources, so you can really get rid of shadows. And I think also having something like a video light, I don't recommend it as a main light source for still photography, but what's cool about it, and especially harking back to what Sarah was saying about experimentation, is that it's a constant light source. So you can actually play around with photography while you have this constant light source that you can move around and light whether it's you're taking a macro photo or you're taking a photo of somebody, you can actually see in real time what that light looks like, because unlike a flash, which of course fires when you hit the shutter, the video light is a constant light source, so you can see exactly what your image is going to look like before you even take the shot.
All right, and so we have a couple of questions, Reggie. The first one is just to clarify, the speed light is for DSL only, right? Or is there a version people could use with their phone or their tablet or something like that?
Thanks for asking that question. Speed lights are definitely for DSLRs, but also for some point and shoot. A lot of point and shoot cameras might have, some of the newer ones, there's definitely a few that have the hot shoe on it as well. I have not yet seen anyone, and I could be wrong because technology is constantly advancing. I have not yet seen a speed light adapter that hooks into, like, say, for instance, a lightning port for an iPhone, but something like a LumaCube, or there's all these other little gadgets that have come out over the last 5 years that allow you to be able to use light, a portable, movable, easily portable light source with cell phones, tablets, and you name it.
Awesome. And then the next question we had was, Ruthie has an LED light ring that she can add a diffuser to. Do you feel like that's the kind of thing that would work for video as well as photography?
If it's a continuous light source, then absolutely. If it's a continuous video light source, yeah, that's a really great thing. Ring lights are fantastic because, I used to have a macro lens and it had a ring light. And I did a lot of portraits with it. I ultimately got rid of that lens because its focus was too slow, so it was hard for me to get and nail consistently the shots that I wanted. But one of the things that I really appreciated about it is the very even distribution of light. It also creates, ring lights are great because they create this little ring catch light in the eye. And when you see that, it's really attractive. There's something really cool about it. And I do know a lot of people shoot male and female models with ring lights because of that very reason. It's a very specific style. What's cool about being able to put a diffuser on it is that if you don't want the very distinct ring in the eye, the diffuser should soften that. And so it gives you more options for flexibility.
Yeah, so just to confirm, because I know we had a couple other people asking questions in there about the same thing, the LED diffuser light, as well as the ring lights that we talk about, to me, can all be used, even if you're using a phone or a tablet. Those
Yep.
things all have value, regardless of which type of camera that you're using.
Yeah, any continuous light source works great with tablets and cell phones, and you can put them wherever you want.
Great, so Reggie shared a lot. I did create some slides for you all that kind of outline exactly what we just shared, more in bullet points. And then I've included in the slide deck some links that you can click to sort of read more about this, and not only read more, but actually to see examples of what we mean when we say diffused versus not diffused, or hard versus soft. So if that's a new conversation for you, feel free to dig into some of these links and kind of get a visual on exactly what it is that Reggie and I are talking about. So you can see I've included some lighting guides, lighting on the fly when you're out and about doing different things. And like I said, that first link will really give you some comparisons of what is hard and soft, right? So that you can really get a visual on what it is that, good lighting really actually is.
Mm-hmm.
And then Ruthie, I see your comment. The ring light is what I assume you're talking about on jewelry isn't good, but you can aim the LED light offside instead of directly. So yeah, so I think, again, I'm not quite sure what you're saying, but I think what you're saying is yes, what Reggie said about the eyes, getting the ring of light inside of someone's eyes. If they're wearing something very sparkly, a dress, jewelry, things like that, you do have to be careful with ring lights because it can be creating an effect that you may or may not want on your image or in your video. And then, yes, I think with all lighting that you have, you should explore moving it around. So I'm a real DIY person. If you saw me in my space right now, I have like a living room lamp next to me to try to offset the fact that my office is a lot of overhead light. And, you know, I've moved this desk lamp like around me 10 times to try to figure out exactly where it's going to do sort of the best work of illuminating my face so there's no shadows from the top down. So I definitely think it's very important to kind of test out things.
One thing I wanted to add.
Question, what kind of lighting for close-up of jewelry for jewelers? Honestly, I don't know the answer to that question. Reggie, do you know for shooting products like that, what might be the best choice of lighting?
Absolutely. So if you're using a DSLR, I would suggest getting a macro light or macro lens and then getting a ring light for that, because a ring light allows you for that. A ring light can work good for jewelry in that respect because it's designed, and usually they're, like for instance, Canon's 100mm macro has a ring light. They have 2 or 3 different kinds of ring lights. One of them's a twin light that has 2 little lights on the side. I think that one is used more for jewelry because you have the ring and then you have offset from the ring, you have 2 smaller lights. So you can actually engage those independently. So as you get close to your subject, you can actually dial in how much light you actually need. But even a video lights are great, like I said, because you can dial in the Kelvin, so you can warm the scene up or cool it down visually. And what's great about that is that you can see that in real time. So as you're looking at how your jewelry photos are coming out, and you look at it on the LCD screen and it's too yellow or whatever, you can actually adjust for that with the light. But like I guess it was Ruthie said earlier, moving the light off to the side is great because then you don't get if you have these reflective surfaces, you don't get the light reflecting in it. And one other thing I wanted to add too is when using any kind of light when photographing people, whether it's on your cell phone or whether it's on a DSLR or a point and shoot, make sure you zoom in and look at the glasses and look at reflective, like if they have any perspiration in their face, look at reflective surfaces and see how the light is hitting those. A lot of times you might not see it if the image is zoomed all the way out, but you might actually see, like for instance, if you do have one of these video lights might not look very attractive or cool or compelling if you can see them reflecting in the glasses. They might either block the eyes or they just may look like a distraction. And the shape of them is not very compelling. Rings are kind of cool, but this rectangular, light box, maybe not so much. So I would say just make sure you get in the habit, and that's kind of with everything, just making sure your sharpness is there, making sure everything is in focus. Just get in the habit of pinching and zooming on your cell phone or your tablet, and then pinching and zooming if you have it on your DSLR. And then also just, hitting those zoom in and out buttons on your point and shoots and DSLRs.
Okay, so we've got a few questions, but then we have to move on so we can stay on time and cover the rest of the topics. But we have a lot of people who are dealing with fabric, Reggie, painted silk art, hand-woven clothing, fabrics of different kinds. Are all the suggestions that you just made about lighting for the jewelry and things like that, do you feel like a lot of that applies to filming fabric as well, that might have different luminescent qualities associated with it?
Honestly, anytime I have to photograph art, my best case scenario is a cloudy day. I take it outside and I prop it up and I set it up however I need to. And then I can get my photos without any kind of light cast. Because when you're photographing art, obviously you want to make sure that there is no light influencing the look of the art, right? We want the art to be as true and authentic as possible. But if you don't have that capability, I say the most diffuse light you can do. So if you're using an LED panel or a few of them, get like a really a couple layers of sheer white fabric to cover it up so that it diffuses the light even more, so you get this really soft light. it's honestly, it's really hard to shoot artwork inside because you're going to have light coming from the overhead lights, from the windows, and it's just
Yeah.
difficult. So available light is my advice for
Yeah.
photographing anything fabric related, because then you can also make sure you minimize any kind of light influence.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I'm sorry, everybody, but we can't answer lighting questions for every specific product that you all offer. So I really want to encourage you to go back over what Reggie just shared and to use some of these suggestions based on any type of art, fabric, ceramics, anything else, jewelry, that's going to have some sort of relationship to the light where the light can pick up on things, right? Everything he just suggested is going to work regardless of what type of art or product we're talking about, but especially if it has some sort of shine, sparkle, maybe it's made up of different materials. So I apologize we don't have time to just stay on that topic, but we have to cover some of the other things. So the other things that I wanted to talk about today were really graphic design and editing and video related. So there's a few things that I want to touch on. And we're going to share, I think, some tools that both Reggie and I use, and you have the links to those tools here, so you can go and check them out. When it comes to graphic design and just creating graphics and editing, I think Reggie and I both use Adobe products. And Adobe Start, Adobe Premiere, there's a number of different things for video and graphic design that you could use. Canva is a little bit more of a DIY system that I use for a lot of social media, but I think one of the things that you really want to do is kind of put together a plan first so that all the graphics and all the different things that you're going to create have some type of consistency. And I'm going to show you examples of this, but really it has to do with creating, you know, sort of a color palette, knowing what your logo colors are and what other complementary colors you might want to use, choosing maybe one or two preferred fonts that you like, figuring out if you're going to use stock photography or stock graphics, that you actually kind of go with a certain style that's really, like I said, consistent. And a lot of times I want to make sure that I have a JPEG or a PNG of the logo when it comes to using my logo. And a PNG is valuable because the logos themselves, you know, sometimes we want them to lay over a picture, or we want them to lay over a color. And if we have a PNG, then we're not going to get that white square that we get from a JPEG. So Reggie, I'm curious, with Canva and Adobe, what do you suggest for people who are getting started with those? You know, I think when you're newer to this type of system, it's harder to learn. Canva, of course, has a ton of video tutorials that you can use to learn how to make your own social media graphics, especially. They have a lot of templates. You can also do a lot of print design there of your own graphics. And especially if you know what fonts and colors and you have your logo, you can create some really beautiful stuff. With Adobe, what are some ways people can get started?
Well, I think you spelled it out beautifully. I think really finding a tutorial that you feel comfortable following and just digging right in. You know, if you're, I'd say, you know, probably not the best scenario is if you actually have a paid gig or something you're up against a deadline. Probably not the best time to familiarize yourself with the software. But if that's not the case, I say make just a fun little just for you project so you can familiarize yourself with the app. All these apps have a learning curve. Even the DIY ones still have somewhat a learning curve. And so I recommend going back to that sort of inspiration foundation. Go and look for content that you like, things that are appealing to you, and then maybe try to recreate them. See what it might take to recreate what someone else has already done. And through that process, you start to understand the tool sets that are available in those independent pieces of software. Of course, I've been using all the commercial Adobe stuff. You know, I've been in, you know, I got my degree in graphic design in 1997 and have sort of grown and evolved with all of the software. So for me, for me, the familiarity is there. And so I feel best suited in like Illustrator, InDesign, for video, Adobe Premiere, Adobe After Effects. You know, all those applications have really robust tool sets. And I do find them to be not for the faint of heart, but I also know that there are a ton of amazing things that you can do with them. So if you do love software and it's easy for you to adapt to new software, I say skip the DIY stuff and play around with the heavy hitting things. If you do, in fact, have a Creative Cloud membership, it's great because if you do have Creative Cloud, you can download almost all the software that they have available, and then you can play around with them. There's tutorials inside of them. I think you might be surprised how easy it is to get up and running with even some of the more robust pieces of software as well.
And so we've included the same thing for video design and editing. Again, a link to Adobe Premiere, which is a tool that both Reggie and I really like. I've included some other ones as well. I use Camtasia to do a lot of my video editing on my laptop for different things like this webinar. So when I'm done, I actually take the video off of Zoom and I edit it in Camtasia for audio. I add in my logo at the beginning and end and different things like that. If you have a Mac computer, you can use something like Imovie, and Filmora is a great system for those of you that are using mobile devices. So if you need to be able to do editing directly on your phone and directly on your tablet, I feel like Filmora is, again, it still has a learning curve, but it can be a great introduction to the tools. And then you might even graduate up once you feel comfortable with the basics to learning something that's more Adobe focused, or maybe learning something like Camtasia. But I think when you're thinking about video content, very similar to making your own graphics, you really want to be putting a few things together beforehand, and really thinking before you're actually creating the final video, you want to have some things in place. So you want to really outline what the video is going to be about. You might want to record multiple versions of the video that you're shooting from different angles, maybe with different scripts until you see which one you like the best. Sometimes you're going to want to create or buy B-roll footage. That's basically video footage that you can voice over. So especially for those of you that are arts and crafts people, you can actually film video of yourself doing something, showing just your hands and the actual craft, and then you can go ahead and voice over that information so that you create a video that really explains what people are seeing. And then of course, if you've already put together kind of your branding guide, I think you want to make sure you have that stuff available for your video. So you know what colors you want different things to be if you're going to add different colors to the video. You have your logo if you want to add it. You have some other types of graphic elements that are going to make your video consistent with the rest of your branding. And then the one thing I remind everybody about creating your own video content is you need to have a plan to store the files. A lot of times when you're making videos, the files are huge. They're hundreds of megabytes. When I do an hour-long webinar, I end up with a video that's hundreds of megabytes large. So if I'm not careful, that's going to fill up my computer or my phone or my tablet really quickly. So I want to have somewhere like Google Drive or Dropbox or some other. I have Office 365 where I can store files. So there's lots of cloud storage you can use. If you're using your computer, you could have an external hard drive and things like that. So we're going to get to the questions, but I want to cover just a few more things because we're coming down to the top of the hour. One thing that's really important about video is that the audio matters. So even when you're doing video and you're new to it and maybe you're not shooting the most professional thing in the world, it's not the most perfect thing, but it does really communicate your message. That's okay, especially with social media, email marketing, and even websites now. DIY video is something that people expect to a certain extent, but when they can't hear what's going on, that's a really big mistake that can happen with your video content. So definitely, I think whatever you're using out of that list of software that we shared, you really want to pay attention on all these systems to these pieces. How are they letting you edit the audio? Do they have the volume leveling? Can you mix multi-tracks? So can you have a voiceover with music and adjust the volumes separately? All of that different stuff, because it's going to be really valuable as you get better and better at creating the visuals to make sure that the audio quality is good. And that means either having a great headset, having a good microphone with whatever device you're using. So I did want to make that point because I think it's a really valuable piece. And then what I've included for you is some examples of these things. So to use AIGA as an example, this is a branding guide that I put together for our work on social media. It shows me all of the colors, including the hex color The hex color is right here. It's a sort of series of numbers and letters that I can put in to tell Canva or Adobe or any of the other editing products or softwares, this is the exact color I want to have here. So you always want to have this color palette have those hex colors, especially for web use or digital use. You can also see we've got a couple fonts that are preferred. We've got a few different versions of our logo, orange, black, and then with the white in the name. And so we can use those on different things and they look great no matter what. So once I've put this together, it allows me to use something like Canva or use something like Adobe to really create templates for my social media content and to keep pumping out graphics that are all sort of consistent to AIGA. So I've just put in some examples of this because I think it's always helpful to get a visual. And most of these were made with Canva, where I take the templates and I actually adjust the photos and I adjust the actual color scheme to match our actual colors. So you can see examples of our LinkedIn. This month I'm talking a lot about nature. This is our Facebook page. And again, these are really simple templates that I've used to create some brand consistency. So before we talk about some examples on how to tell a story, I want to look here at the questions. I see from Jojo, let me see here. Oh yeah, you're just making a comment, Jojo, that hiring a great graphic designer can set your brand apart from all the other first-time designers since it takes years to polish this skill. So I have to agree, of course, if you hire somebody like Reggie, who's got years of this skill set, it is obviously going to make a big difference. So today we're definitely talking on purpose a little bit about DIY. And, you know, I think for everybody at the end of the day, when you can delegate it, it's really awesome. I love to delegate my graphics to Krista, who works with me sometimes, because she is a true graphic designer and she's going to be able to make graphics from scratch that are truly original, which is not what I'm doing when I'm in Canva using a template, right? So I'm not building those templates from scratch. They're not really my artwork. They're somebody else's artwork that I'm adapting to my brand. So I think the perk of really working with a professional designer is having that originality in the designs that you get. Cassie, I see your comment on how would I compare using Camtasia to iMovie. I personally prefer Camtasia better, mostly because it creates smaller files. As much as I like iMovie, Apple products tend to create very large file sizes, which are sometimes really hard to use and manipulate. So because I do long form video content, Camtasia is the thing that I prefer. Carissa, you're asking about Filmora over Adobe Premiere Rush for mobile. And again, Reggie, feel free to jump in on this. I feel like with Adobe Premiere Rush, there's just more options. It's a little bit more of a professional tool, even when you're using the mobile version. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. But the most important thing is it's really good to try these things out and just do a quick little trial project with them, because what's really gonna make it most useful to you is your comfort level with it, and the interfaces are not all created equal. So it's gonna come down to what you feel most comfortable using, because sometimes using the tool with the most features isn't the thing that's gonna work best for you. It's using the tool that you know you can consistently do what you need to do and do it efficiently.
Yeah, and so that's my pitch for Filmora, is that I feel like Filmora is a little bit lower key. They have a lot of great options, but it's not nearly as detailed as Adobe is to me personally. And again, I'm not a professional. So when I get in there, I feel like Filmora is a little bit easier to learn. The learning curve is a little smaller. But once you get good at something like that, like I said, making the leap to something that's got more information and detail involved becomes easier because you kind of have a baseline understanding of the tools. So I know we're right at 1 o'clock. If anybody has other questions, feel free to submit them. We'll go ahead and stay on for a few more minutes. But the last piece I wanted Reggie to share with us was this idea of telling a story with imagery. And you provided a few examples for us, Reggie. So I was wondering if you could talk really quickly about the stories behind these actual images.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was the creative director for Warren Wilson College, they were having this real awesome day where they wanted all women and people that identified as feminine gender to be able to come and spend the day learning how to work on an automobile. And so these three lovely ladies actually were part of the mechanical crew, or the auto mechanic crew at Warren Wilson College. And so what I thought was, I really wanted to show them, like, I wanted them to literally be in the, you know, in the vehicle, like under the hood, literally under the hood. And they loved the idea, and we had a lot of fun with it. We did a lot of really cool shots. I did some individual profiles as well. But it's a simple story. I mean, it's very obvious. One of them is in one of the overalls. They're, you know, the vehicle. It's very difficult to not understand that these are women that are actually working on the car, that are interfacing with the car.
All right, and the
You want to move to the next one, Sarah?
Do you want to talk a little bit about this one, Reggie?
Yeah, so this is actually a pretty powerful image for me. This, you know, I think you can kind of put together in this image that it feels like some kind of memorial, or there's something there. So this was in Rwanda, and this couple they were actually in the remains of a building where they were when some gunmen, some Hutu gunmen, came down and just opened fire on. There were probably 200 or 300 Tutsis in that particular structure. And so all those ribbons, those are sort of offerings. The cement, they actually ended up burying all of the people that perished in that building in that cement. So they're all in there. It just became a big tomb, essentially. And so I wanted to get a portrait of them inside that space, and you could just see these people as sort of resilient as they are. They really, you know, there's a lot of feeling, there's a lot of emotion in that room. It was pretty wild being there, and pretty powerful.
That's really beautiful. Thanks for sharing that, Reggie. There's so much in that photo, but to hear the real story is kind of powerful. So again, because we are right at the top of the hour, we're already 5 minutes over. So thank you all for the extra time. This is one more of Reggie's photos. Yep. And so I just wanted to invite you to take a look at these other photos in the slide deck. And I've included two from some friends of mine that I thought, again, were a little bit more of an example of a story being told through an image. And so essentially what I want to encourage everyone to do is look at these photos and just think about what story comes across to you, right? What do you feel when you look at it? This last one is actually a photo from my friend Micah McKenzie. And I love that when he posted this, which is obviously an edited photo that he took, he actually explains in his Instagram post what the story is behind this. So I want you to just think about this, because as you go out and represent your brands and think about how you can connect with people visually, this part of it is going to make a big impact in, you know, how your stuff comes across. Like to Reggie's point at the beginning, the reason some photos get lots of likes and lots of clicks and lots of comments and things like that is basically because I think people have put some real thought and intention into what they are creating. So I really appreciate everyone being here. I know we've got a few more questions. If you have a few more minutes, Reggie, I'd love to keep talking about some of these, but I know some folks have to go. So if you have to head out and get back to work, thank you so much for joining us as usual. And like I said, tomorrow you will get an email with the recording as well as the slide deck. You can click on all of these links. You'll also have some information about our upcoming webinar in October, which is actually going to be about preparing for your holiday marketing campaigns. And you can learn more about what we're doing here at JB Media. You can also just reach out to me directly if you have any questions, and you'll have all of my contact information. So thank you all again for being here to join us. The last few questions I had, one was from Jeanette. What is the best way or program to do voiceovers? So I'm curious, Reggie, if there's anything particular that's your preference for doing that kind of thing.
You know, honestly, when it comes to voiceovers, I don't do a ton of that kind of work. I usually work with an audio engineer to handle voiceover work. But there is an app called Audition. So if you're putting together a video and you have a separate audio track, Audition is Adobe's audio sort of engineering tool that is fairly approachable, and it allows you to actually fine tune the audio so that it fits within the mix. There's also the ability to just drop it right on the timeline in whatever app you're using and being able to adjust it as needed. Almost all video apps will have some limited audio, a limited audio tool set at the very least to allow you to make whatever adjustments, to be able to raise the volume as necessary, to be able to move the audio around on the timeline as needed. That's probably the extent of my knowledge when it comes to doing voiceover work. Anytime I've done it, the audio has come to me already polished and ready to drop onto the timeline. So all I really have to do is put it where I need to put it.
Yeah, and I'll say that I use Camtasia because they actually allow me to record my screen and then put my audio over top of it simultaneously. So I use Camtasia regularly for that. If you're recording your screen and doing a voiceover, I feel like that's very different than recording footage and doing a voiceover. So,
True.
you know, if you're doing something on your screen that you want to record, like some of us do, then really you can typically get a screen casting system or a screen recording system, which are actually typically much more affordable. Then you just need a good mic or a good headset. If you're going to be actually taking footage in video, importing it, and then recording over top of it, to me, that's where you may need something like Camtasia. You may need something, you know, like Imovie, where you can actually take the footage, upload it, and then directly record the audio over top. And that allows you to literally like see the video while you're recording over top of it. And especially for me, when I'm creating my own stuff, that's just important for me to kind of see how they line up. So that would be my suggestion. I see from Bridget.
I was going to say, I will add to that. There is a really inexpensive tool if you're a Mac user called Monosnap, and it's Monosnap, and it is great if you're doing screencasts because you can actually drag a marquee around whatever it is you want to record on your screen, so you don't have to record the whole screen. You record whatever portion of it, and then you can hook up whatever mic you want to your system to be able to record the audio directly, do the voiceover recording, and it goes to, like what you were saying, being able to record it directly with the piece. And so that is what I use. I always do video tutorials when I finish a website so people can actually see me working on their exact website and teaching them how to do all the different things.
Great. Could you send me that link, Reggie,
Yep.
after this? And then I'll include it in the email when we send it out. Awesome.
Absolutely.
And then Bridget, I see your comment. I'm a beginner when it comes to editing video. I have iMovie. Any suggestions for starting the process of cutting clips to put together for a long video? So I'm just going to throw out that I think one, you know, to me, when you have multiple clips, just upload them all and then start trimming out the things that need to be removed. And then start thinking about the order of the clips. And if you already know the order, great. Sometimes I move things around once I have them up there. And the key thing you're gonna have to learn about in iMovie is transitions. So when you have multiple clips where it's not leading directly one into it, it's not like one continuous filming, right? You're gonna be chopping out different things and have different clips themselves. That's where you need transitions between the clips. And so you're going to want to kind of learn about that. And so, yeah, if you have one long video that you need to make into smaller ones, you're going to upload it into iMovie. And what you're really going to have to get used to is sort of mapping out where you want to clip things apart. And then what you're going to have to do is really be prepared, because most of these systems, what you can do is you don't want to just chop up your whole long video content. You might want to save a copy of that for later. So make sure you have a copy of that full video that you're going to keep, and then import it into iMovie, and then start, you know, basically editing it down. And a lot of times, like I said, you're going to want to sort of do some edits, think about it, maybe do some more edits and so forth. And if you take any clips and pair them together, that's when I think you actually need to work on understanding how to add the transitions. Yeah, and so if you're already good with transitions, then that's great, then you should be fine. And it's pretty straightforward in iMovie. You can also Google anything you want to learn about iMovie, and it's pretty much free on YouTube. So it is very easy as far as cutting clips, cutting sections of a longer video to do a shorter one. I think that's all pretty straightforward, almost no matter what you're using. You're just going to select the area that you want and pull that out as its separate clip. And hopefully, I think we went through a number of questions there, but I hope that answered the question. And then the last question we had, Reggie, from JoJo is there any amazing higher level knowledge about visual content or amazing secrets that you have not included today that you could impart to everybody as we end?
Yeah, actually, I think the most important thing is find the thing that you love to do the most. Whether it's doing landscape photography, whether it's photographing people, and really just embrace it, because it's inevitable that the more you do it, the better you'll get at it, and the more you'll be able to hone in that skill and be able to refine all the nuances of it that really carve out your unique style. And it all comes from passion. It's very difficult to try to capture content that is not compelling to you, because if it's not compelling to you, it's not going to be compelling to anybody else as well. So find that thing that you do that really drives you and lay into it.
Great. And then I see this one final question, and I kind of answered this already, but for integrative family medicine, when it comes to iMovie and let's say Filmora, the truth is they're very, very similar. I think it just comes down to a personal choice on your end. So I would test them both out, see if there's one that you like better. Like I said, my only complaint for iMovie, although I'm a big Apple user and I love Apple products, iMovie creates very, very large, heavy files. And so sometimes when you're trying to share that file with other people, you're trying to upload it to things, it can be very, very big, especially if your content is long form. So I will say personally, I like Filmora more for long form, because I think, again, I get these smaller, slightly smaller files. But for a lot of people, again, the decision comes down to just what feels more intuitive to them. You're going to get almost all the same tools with both of them. iMovie has an amazing mobile app that you can use. So I find that, it's kind of a trade-off. And some people prefer iMovie because it's free and they don't have to pay for it at all. It comes with their computer. It comes with, everything they're doing on a Mac or an Apple product can be used with that system. So sometimes that's just easier. And I think especially if you're doing shorter video, iMovie can be awesome and do a lot of what you need. It's only when you get to my level where you're doing 30-minute, 60-minute, 3-hour videos where I'm like, ugh, the iMovie files are so big, my own computer doesn't like them. And like it becomes really hard to reduce the size of those iMovie files without losing some quality. So to me, that's why Filmora and Camtasia have been great alternatives for me that I can use. And I have a PC that I do a lot of my video editing on. And again, it's because I typically find I'm just going to get smaller, easier to manipulate files.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that looks like all the questions we have for today. Again, Reggie, thank you so much for being here. Yeah, I don't know if you saw the chat, but it was blowing up because I think a lot of people really, really appreciated all the different advice that you gave, and that you're willing as a professional to be here with us today, even though I know if we all could, we'd all hire videographers and graphic designers to take this work off our plate. I really appreciate you gifting us with your knowledge so that people can get better at doing their own stuff on their own and hopefully grow their businesses enough that pretty soon they can start delegating. So thanks so much for being here.
The pleasure was mine. The pleasure was mine. This is one of my favorite things, is sharing knowledge. So thanks for the invite. Thanks for giving me a platform to be able to help a few people out. And yeah, go forth and prosper, everybody. This is great. This is a great type of work to be doing, and it is very inspiring. And I hope you all find where it is you want to be within that spectrum.
Yes, and as we say here at JB Media, you do amazing things. More people should know. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there and experiment and learn from others and just give it a shot. anything that you haven't done before, now's a great time, especially as we come to the end of the year, to think about how going into 2021, you're going to take your graphics and your content up to the next level. So I just want to encourage you. In the beginning, you might be a newbie, you might be just starting out. That's okay. Don't be afraid. And hopefully in the future, if you need more support, you'll join us for other digital drop-ins. So thanks so much and have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Bye now.